Overthinking steals your happiness. Inner Steel, full YouTube script. Cold open. You didn't lose your peace to the world. You gave it away, one thought at a time. Right now, somewhere in your mind, there is a conversation happening that no one else can hear. A replay of something that was said to you 3 days ago. A simulation of something that hasn't happened yet. A verdict you've already passed on yourself before the day has even begun. That's not thinking. That's a war you're fighting inside your own skull, and you're losing. Overthinking is not intelligence. It's not carefulness. It's not preparation. It is the slow theft of everything that makes life worth living, your joy, your clarity, your presence, your power. And what's terrifying is that most people never even realize it's happening. They mistake the noise for wisdom. They call it being deep. They wear their anxiety like a badge of seriousness. But the Stoics knew something the modern world has forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, ruler of the ancient world, wrote in his private journal words that were never meant to be read by anyone. And what did the most powerful man alive write to himself? He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't telling his generals. He wasn't performing for history. He was reminding himself. Because even Marcus Aurelius had to fight the same battle you're fighting right now. Today, we are going to dismantle overthinking, not with affirmations, not with toxic positivity, not with the shallow advice you've already heard 1,000 times. We're going to go deep. We're going to cut to the root. Stay with me. Because what you are about to hear will change the way you live. Introduction. There is a man I want you to picture. His name doesn't matter. What matters is that you've probably met him, or you've been him. He is talented. Genuinely talented. His colleagues see it. His family sees it. Even his friends pull him aside sometimes and say, "You're one of the smartest people I know." And he smiles. He thanks them. And then, alone in his car on the way home, he replays every word of the conversation, wondering if they meant it, wondering what he should have said differently, wondering why he always feels 2 steps behind the version of himself everyone else seems to believe in. He doesn't sleep well. Not because his life is catastrophic, it isn't. He has enough. But enough never quiets the mind that keeps asking, what if this falls apart? What if I made the wrong choice? What if they don't respect me? What if I never become who I'm supposed to be? He is being robbed. Not by circumstances. Not by enemies. By his own mind. This is the story of the overthinker, and it is one of the most common, most painful, and most invisible forms of suffering on earth. The ancient Stoics called excessive mental rumination a disease of the soul, not metaphorically, but clinically. Seneca wrote in one of his letters to Lucilius, "There is nothing so wretched or foolish as to anticipate misfortune. What madness is it to be expecting evil before it comes?" He was writing 2,000 years ago. He could have been writing this morning. This script is not about suppressing thought. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your own mind. It's about understanding what overthinking actually is, why it happens, what it steals from you, and most importantly, how to stop it from dictating the terms of your life. If you've found this channel and this video is speaking to something real in you, I want you to consider subscribing to Inner Steel. We build this kind of content for people who are serious about the work, not just the words. Hit that button and stay in the fight. Now let's begin. Point 1. The mind that won't stop is not a sharp mind, it's a suffering one. Let's start with the lie that keeps the cycle alive. Most overthinkers believe, deep down, even if they never say it aloud, that their overthinking is a feature, not a bug. That because they think more, they're protecting themselves more. That because they've run every scenario, they're more prepared. That because they've analyzed the risk from 12 angles, they're smarter than the person who just acts. This is a story I want to tell you. In the summer of 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the shores of what is now Mexico. He had 600 men. He was facing an empire of millions. By any rational analysis, the mission was suicidal. His men knew it. They began to talk of retreat, of sailing back to Cuba, to safety, to certainty. The anxiety was real. The doubt was justified. And so his officers came to him with plans, contingencies, scenarios, what-ifs. Cortez listened to all of it. And then he ordered the ships burned. Now, I am not endorsing Cortez morally. History is complicated. But what he understood in that moment was this: the overthinking of his men was not preparation. It was paralysis dressed as prudence. The ships weren't an escape route. They were a psychological anchor keeping his soldiers mentally half committed to a mission that demanded everything. When there is no way back, the mind stops running simulations of retreat. It has no choice but to move forward. Overthinking survives on options. It feeds on the idea that if you just keep analyzing, you'll find the perfect move, the one with no risk, no loss, no pain. But that move does not exist. And the mind that keeps searching for it is not sharp. It is afraid. The research backs this up. Psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema, who spent decades studying rumination at Yale, found that people who overthink don't make better decisions, they make worse ones. They feel more certain of their analysis and less capable of acting on it. The thinking isn't solving anything. It's spinning in place. Here is the reframe: a quiet mind is not an empty mind. It is a focused one. It is a mind that has learned to ask one question instead of 40. What is the next right move? Not the perfect move. Not the safe move. The next right one. That is where clarity lives. Not in the spiral. In the step. Point 2. Overthinking is grief for a present moment you're not living. There is something nobody tells you about overthinking. It does not live in the future or the past. Those are just the addresses it uses. Overthinking lives in the present, it just refuses to be present. Consider this. When you are replaying a conversation that happened 3 years ago, where are you? When you are running through 17 different ways a meeting tomorrow might go wrong, where are you? You are nowhere near your actual life. You are a ghost haunting rooms that don't exist. I want to tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena was a concert pianist. Not famous, but gifted in that rare way that makes people stop walking when they hear her play. She had a husband she loved. A daughter who laughed loud enough to fill a house. A small apartment in Vienna with afternoon light that fell through the windows in a way she always said she would paint someday. But Elena had a mind that never rested. She rehearsed her performances obsessively, not the music, but the judgment. She would hear imagined critics in her head during practice. She would relive reviews from years prior while bathing her daughter. She would lie awake calculating what audiences were thinking during her silences. When her daughter turned 7, Elena realized she could not remember the previous year. Not the birthday, not the summer, not the first day of school. She had been physically present for all of it. But she had been nowhere near it. She had been living in a performance that hadn't happened yet, or a critique that was long finished. That's what overthinking takes. It doesn't just steal your happiness. It steals your life, the actual texture of it. The warmth. The small sacred moments that you will one day desperately wish you could return to. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and became one of the most admired minds in the ancient world, put it plainly. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. The overthinker grieves constantly, for outcomes not yet arrived, for words already gone, for a version of events that exists only in the theater of their own mind. The present moment is not waiting for you to finish thinking. It is moving on without you. And one day you will look up from the spiral and realize the life you were so busy protecting, you missed it. This is not meant to be cruel. It's meant to be a door. Because the moment you truly understand what overthinking costs you, you stop treating it as a neutral habit. You start treating it like the thief it is. Point 3. Your thoughts are not facts, and the Stoics knew it. One of the most dangerous things about the overthinking mind is how convincing it sounds. The thoughts don't come in with a disclaimer. They don't say, "This is speculation," or "This is a worst-case scenario generated by a frightened part of you." They arrive with authority. They feel like truth. They feel like intelligence. They don't really respect me. How do you know? This is all going to fall apart. Based on what? I'm not good enough for this. Says who? Let me tell you about a soldier named Hiro Onoda. Hiro Onoda was a Japanese intelligence officer stationed in the Philippine jungle during World War II. He was loyal, disciplined, and fiercely committed to his mission. When the war ended in 1945, Onoda didn't stop fighting. He remained in the jungle for 29 years, until 1974, waging a guerrilla war against local police and civilians because he believed, with absolute certainty, that the war was still ongoing. The leaflets dropped from planes telling him the war was over? Propaganda. The newspapers? Forgeries. Every signal from the outside world that contradicted his internal conviction was filtered out, discredited, or ignored. He was not stupid. He was not insane. He was a man whose mind had built a belief so total that no evidence could penetrate it. We do this. Not in jungles. In our own heads. The narrative you've built, about who you are, what you deserve, how others see you, what will happen to you, is not reality. It is a model of reality, assembled from memory, fear, past wounds, and incomplete information. And the overthinker treats this model as gospel, going to war every day to defend it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The estimate. The interpretation. The story you've decided is true. This is the Stoic discipline of judgment, the understanding that between any event and your response to it, there is a space. And in that space lives your freedom. Overthinking collapses that space. It turns the event and the story about the event into one fused, immovable thing. Reclaiming that space is the beginning of sovereignty over your own mind. Ask yourself, is this thought a fact, or is this thought a fear wearing the costume of a fact? That one question, practiced with discipline, will change your interior world. Point 4. The paralysis of perfection. How overthinking kills action. Every overthinker has a drawer. Not a literal drawer, though sometimes that too. But a mental drawer. Full of half-started plans, businesses never launched, letters never sent, conversations never had, moves never made. All of them waiting for the moment when everything felt certain enough, safe enough, ready enough. That moment never comes. The drawer gets fuller. I want to tell you about Leonardo da Vinci. There is a version of this story you've probably heard, the genius, the polymath, the man who imagined helicopters and solar power centuries before their time. That version is true. But here is the part that gets left out. Leonardo da Vinci left dozens of his greatest works unfinished. Not because he lacked talent. Not because he ran out of time. Because he was pathologically unable to call anything complete. He would return to a painting years later, adjusting the shadow of a finger, reconsidering the angle of a glance, dissatisfied with a shade of blue that no one else could distinguish from perfection. Patrons grew furious with him. Milan, Florence, Rome, wherever he worked, the same pattern repeated. Extraordinary vision. Stunning early work. And then an endless loop of revision and reconsideration that left commissions abandoned and promises unkept. His notebooks are full of ideas that would have changed the world, and didn't, because Leonardo could not stop thinking long enough to finish building them. Genius can be sabotaged by the very mind that creates it. The perfection trap is this. The overthinker believes that if they just think a little longer, they will arrive at a version of their plan so airtight that failure becomes impossible. But perfectionism is not a high standard. It is fear with an intellectual disguise. It is the mind saying, "I'm not ready," when what it means is, "I'm afraid." Seneca was unsparing on this point. He wrote, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." He could see, 2,000 years ago, what we are still struggling to learn. The cost of waiting for certainty is the life you spend while waiting. Action is not the opposite of thoughtfulness. Imperfect, honest, grounded action is the highest form of thoughtfulness, because it is in contact with reality. The spiral of overthinking is not. It is a simulation. And you cannot build a real life inside a simulation. Done is not the enemy of great. Endless thinking is. Point 5. What overthinking does to your body, the science they don't teach you. Let's talk about what this costs you physically. Because this isn't just a psychological problem. It's biological. It's physical. And understanding that can make the urgency real in a way that philosophy alone sometimes can't. When you overthink, your brain does not know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. Read that again. Your nervous system cannot tell whether the catastrophe you're replaying happened or whether you're just imagining it happening. To your body, the thought and the event produce the same biochemical response. Cortisol floods your system. Your heart rate elevates. Your immune system suppresses. Your digestive system slows. Your sleep architecture breaks down. There's a study I want to point you to, and I'll ask you to verify this independently as I always encourage, from researchers examining chronic ruminators over extended periods. What they found was that people who habitually overthink show measurably higher baseline cortisol levels, disrupted sleep patterns, weaker immune responses, and a significantly elevated risk of anxiety disorders and clinical depression compared to people who ruminate less. You are not just wasting time. You are draining your health. Let me tell you about a man named Charles Darwin. Darwin was one of the most brilliant minds in human history. But he was also one of the most anxious. After publishing his early work, he spent years, decades, consumed by worry about the response his theory of evolution would provoke. He delayed publication of On the Origin of Species by more than 20 years, not because the work wasn't ready, but because he could not stop catastrophizing about the reaction. During those decades of delay, Darwin suffered constant physical illness. Headaches that lasted days. Stomach problems so severe they interrupted his work for weeks. Exhaustion so deep his family feared for his life. His doctors of the era couldn't explain it. Modern historians of medicine largely agree. Much of Darwin's chronic illness was the physical manifestation of his psychological burden. The body keeps the score. The mind that will not rest sends the bill to the flesh. This is not meant to add another worry to your pile. It is meant to reframe what's at stake. When you choose to discipline your thinking, when you interrupt the spiral, redirect to the present, take the action you've been delaying, you are not just making a psychological adjustment. You are protecting your health, your energy, your vitality, your years. The peace you're looking for is not just good for your soul. It's medicine for your body. Point 6. The Stoic cure, negative visualization done right. Here is where we turn a corner. Because so far we've been diagnosing. Now we begin to prescribe. There's a Stoic practice that is widely misunderstood, and when misunderstood, it looks exactly like overthinking. But when practiced correctly, it is its antidote. It is called premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils. The idea is simple. You deliberately imagine the worst thing that could happen. You sit with it. You feel it. You think it through. And then, and this is the part most people miss, you return to the present with gratitude and resolve, because you have faced the darkness and it did not destroy you. This is not the same as catastrophizing. Let me show you the difference. A man named Robert was a junior executive at a firm in New York in the early 1990s. When rumors spread that his division was about to be restructured, Robert's mind went to work. He lay awake every night building elaborate scenarios. He imagined a meeting where he'd be let go. He imagined telling his wife. He imagined the looks on his colleagues' faces. He imagined his career in ruins. He imagined his savings depleting. Each thought led to another darker thought, in an endless chain with no terminus. Robert did not sleep properly for 3 weeks. His performance at work, already under pressure, declined. His relationship with his wife grew strained from his distraction and irritability. When the restructuring came, he was, in fact, let go, partly because his performance in those 3 weeks had confirmed doubts some managers already had. His overthinking didn't protect him from the outcome. It helped cause it. Now contrast that with the Stoic approach. The Stoic sits with the worst case, not for hours, not as an obsession, but deliberately, for a contained and purposeful period. They ask, if this happened, what would I do? They answer that question honestly. They discover, almost always, that they would survive. That there is a path forward. That they are more resilient than the fear implies. And then they close that mental door and return, fully, to the present. This is what Marcus Aurelius did before battles. Not spiral. Not catastrophize. Contemplate, prepare, and release. Then act. The difference between the overthinker and the Stoic is not what they think about. It's what they do with what they think. One drowns in the ocean. The other walks into it, learns its currents, and swims back to shore. Practice this. Set aside 10 minutes. Sit with the fear you've been circling. Look at it directly. Ask what you would do if it happened. Find your answer. Then end the session. Close the door. The deliberate mind is a weapon. The uncontrolled mind is a wound. Point 7. The identity problem. You have become the overthinking. This is the point most people aren't willing to hear. So I want you to stay with me. For many overthinkers, the rumination is not just a habit. It has become an identity. The overthinking is not something they do, it is something they are. And that distinction matters enormously, because you cannot simply discipline away something you've built yourself around. Think about it. If someone asked you to describe yourself, do thoughtful, analytical, careful, or deep appear in that description? Do you take some quiet pride in how seriously you take things? Do you sometimes see people who act quickly and decisively as shallow, reckless, or naive? I want to tell you about Viktor Frankl. Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, Dachau, and 2 other concentration camps. His wife, his mother, and his brother were killed in the Holocaust. He lost everything, every material thing, every relationship, every certainty. What he discovered in that darkness was what he later called the last human freedom, the freedom to choose your response to any circumstance. But what gets less attention is what he observed about the prisoners who did not survive psychologically, not physically, but psychologically. Many of them had built their identity entirely around external things, their profession, their possessions, their social status, their certainty about the future. When those were stripped away, they had no self left to stand on. The men and women who maintained their inner dignity, Frankl observed, were those who had cultivated an identity rooted in something that could not be taken, their values, their choices, their orientation toward meaning. Here is the application. If your identity is built around being someone who thinks deeply and carefully about everything, then the moment you try to stop overthinking, your brain will resist, not because the overthinking is useful, but because it feels like self-erasure. You're not just changing a behavior. You're threatening a self. This is why discipline alone rarely works. You have to rebuild the identity. Not, I am a careful thinker, but, I am someone who acts with clarity and courage. Not, I am thorough, but, I am decisive. Not, I protect myself by anticipating every threat, but, I trust myself to handle what comes. The Stoics understood this. They called it the practice of self-examination, not self-criticism, but honest audit. Who have I become? Does this version of me serve the life I want? And if not, what must I rebuild? The identity shift is slower than a habit change. But it is permanent in a way habit change rarely is. Start there. Who are you, underneath the overthinking? That is the person you must go find. Point 8. The discipline of the decided mind. There's a moment, a specific, internal moment, that separates the person who breaks free from overthinking from the person who remains its prisoner. It's not a revelation. It's not a therapy breakthrough. It's not a book they read or a quote they saw. It is a decision. A quiet, private, non-negotiable decision. I will not live this way anymore. That decision has to be made not once, but dozens of times a day. And that is where discipline comes in. Let me tell you about Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink is a former Navy SEAL commander who led one of the most decorated units in the Iraq War, Task Unit Bruiser, during the Battle of Ramadi, one of the most brutal urban combat operations in recent American military history. In those streets, his men faced life-and-death decisions in seconds. There was no time for spiral. No time for simulation. No time for what if. When he came back and was asked how he made decisions under that kind of pressure, his answer was disarmingly simple. You can't overthink it. You get the information available to you, you make the best call you can with that information, and you execute. You adjust as you go. But you move. He formalized this into what he calls the dichotomy of leadership, the balance between thinking enough and thinking too much, between planning and over-planning, between confidence and arrogance. The discipline is not in thinking more. It's in knowing when thinking has done its work and it's time to act. How do you build this discipline? The Stoics prescribed what we might today call attention training, the deliberate practice of catching yourself mid-spiral and redirecting. Not with shame. Not with, stop thinking that. But with a simple question, is this thought serving me right now? If the answer is yes, if the thinking is generating useful information that leads to a decision or an action, let it continue. If the answer is no, if it is cycling, repeating, catastrophizing, replaying without purpose, interrupt it. Physically if necessary. Stand up. Move your body. Change your environment. Return to the present moment through your senses. What do I see, hear, feel right now? This practice sounds too simple to work. It isn't simple. It is one of the hardest disciplines a human being can build. But it is the discipline that underpins everything else. The calm mind. The decisive character. The fulfilled life. If this kind of content is building something in you, subscribe to Inner Steel. This is what we do here. We don't give you feel-good fluff. We give you the work. Join the channel and stay on the path. Point 9. Acceptance is not surrender. It's the most powerful move. There is a concept in Stoic philosophy that is perhaps the most misunderstood of all of them. It is called amor fati, love of fate. It was not original to the Stoics but was embraced most powerfully by thinkers like Nietzsche and Epictetus, and before them, led by Marcus Aurelius. It does not mean passive resignation. It does not mean approving of everything that happens to you. It means something far more radical. The total refusal to waste energy fighting against what cannot be changed. Overthinking is, at its core, a rejection of reality. The mind keeps spinning because some part of it believes that if it just thinks hard enough, it can retroactively change the past, preemptively prevent all possible futures, or find a version of the present that involves no uncertainty. This is not rationality. This is magical thinking wearing the coat of seriousness. I want to tell you about a man named John. John was a successful architect in his late 40s when his marriage ended. Not dramatically, there was no betrayal, no explosion. Just a slow, painful drift into incompatibility that neither of them had the courage to name until it was undeniable. When it ended, John spent 2 years in the spiral. He replayed every conversation from the last decade of the marriage. He constructed timelines of where things had gone wrong. He cataloged decisions that might have changed the outcome. He imagined alternate histories. He interrogated his own character with a relentlessness that would have broken a lesser man, and nearly did break him. 2 years. Every day. Rebuilding and demolishing the same mental architecture. And then, one morning, he told me he still can't explain exactly why, he simply stopped. Not because he had found answers. Not because the grief was resolved. But because he realized, with a clarity that arrived quietly and stayed, it happened. It is done. No amount of thinking will unwrite it. And every minute I spend inside this spiral is another minute stolen from the life that is still available to me. He called it his acceptance morning. He said it was the most difficult and the most freeing moment of his life. Acceptance is not giving up. It is the recognition that reality does not require your approval to proceed. And the energy you spend fighting that, resisting what has already happened, or what might inevitably happen, is energy that could be channeled into the only thing that actually matters, what you do next. The Stoics did not teach people to feel nothing. They taught people to feel everything, and then choose where to direct their will. That is the discipline. That is the power. Point 10. Build the quiet mind, the daily practice. Everything we've talked about today, the identity, the acceptance, the Stoic practices, the discipline, requires a container. A daily practice. Not once a week. Not when you feel like it. Every day. Because the mind is not something you fix once. It is something you tend, like a fire that needs consistent fuel and constant management. Leave it alone and it goes out. Feed it the wrong things and it burns out of control. Let me tell you about the morning routine of Marcus Aurelius. We know from historical accounts, and from his own writing, that Marcus Aurelius began every day with a period of deliberate reflection. Before the demands of the empire arrived. Before the generals, the senators, the petitioners, the crises. He sat with himself. He wrote. He reminded himself of who he intended to be, not who he feared he was, but who he was committed to becoming. His meditations are, at their heart, a daily practice of self-correction. Not self-flagellation. Not catastrophizing about his failures. Just honest, gentle, firm redirection. This is who I am trying to be. Here is where I fell short yesterday. Here is how I will do better today. That practice, written for no audience but himself, has survived 2,000 years and still speaks with a clarity that most modern self-help cannot touch. Why? Because it came from a man doing the actual work, every day, with nothing to prove and no one to impress. Here is what a daily practice for the quiet mind can look like. In the morning, before you touch your phone, before you check anything, before you let the world pour into you, sit for 5 minutes. Not meditating necessarily, not if that word carries weight you don't want. Just sit. Breathe. Ask yourself, what is one thing I can control today? What is one thing I will let go of? Write it down if you can. Even one sentence. This anchors the day in intention rather than reaction. During the day, when you catch yourself in a spiral, and you will, especially at first, use the interrupt. The physical interrupt. Stand up. Walk outside. Touch something real. Feel the ground under your feet. The body is always in the present. When the mind spirals, return to the body. It will bring you back. In the evening, spend 5 minutes in review. Not in judgment, but in observation. Where did I overthink today? What triggered it? What did I do with it? Was there a moment where I chose the present over the spiral? Celebrate that moment, even if it was small. Especially if it was small. Small wins, compounded daily, become an unrecognizable transformation. This is not a complicated system. It is a consistent one. And consistency is the thing overthinking cannot survive. Because overthinking thrives in chaos, in the reactive day, in the unexamined life. It cannot survive the deliberate mind that has decided, before the day begins, who it intends to be. Closing. I want to come back to where we started. That man I described at the beginning, the talented one, the one his friends call brilliant, the one lying awake at 3 in the morning replaying conversations and simulating catastrophes. The one whose drawer is full of things he almost started. That man is not weak. He is not broken. He is not fundamentally damaged. He is a person who has been running a program that was installed at some point, by fear, by past hurt, by a world that taught him uncertainty is danger, and he's never stopped to ask whether the program is still serving him. It isn't. And the beautiful, hard, terrifying truth is that the program can be rewritten. Not erased. Not deleted. Rewritten. Slowly, consistently, deliberately. With the kind of inner work that doesn't look impressive from the outside but transforms everything from the inside. The Stoics spent their lives building this case, that the only thing you truly own is your own mind, and that the cultivation of that mind, its discipline, its clarity, its capacity for presence, is the highest human work. Not wealth. Not status. Not even legacy. The quality of your inner life, today, in this moment, is the whole game. Overthinking steals that game from you. thought by thought, day by day, until you look up and the life you meant to live is further away than it has ever been. But you are watching this. You stayed. That matters. That is the beginning, not the destination, but the genuine, honest beginning of a person who has decided to take their mind back. Seneca wrote, in one of his final letters, "Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life. Not tomorrow. Not when you're ready. Not when the conditions are perfect. Now. Today. This moment is a life unto itself. Be in it." Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video reached something in you, if it named something you've been living but couldn't articulate, then I'm asking you directly, subscribe to Inner Steel. Leave this video a comment telling me one thing you are going to stop overthinking today. One thing. Just one. And share this with someone who needs it. Not because I want the numbers. Because there is someone in your life who is losing years to the spiral, and this might be the thing that helps them look up. I'll see you in the next one. Stay in the fight. Inner Steel.